How's it going? I think today's video only makes sense after covering yesterday's topic, which is artificial intelligence. And today's topic is pretty much going to focus on natural intelligence or biological intelligence. And I think it's really interesting and at the same time very important to talk about. And some of the ideas in this episode is going to be very interesting to some. Some other people might find it disturbing or worrisome. But the most important thing we can do is try to be as mature about topics and honest about topics as possible. There's a lot of people who like to stay in denial about how much control someone else might be able to have over someone's mind, whether they are manipulative people, friends, or companies, or institutions, technocrats of all sorts. And I think it's important to realize that everything that people do, let me just turn this up a little bit. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That everything people do is a response to something somewhere in the environment or conflicting thoughts inside the mind. And a number of other things, but it all resides within the mind. And it's kind of important to separate the brain from the mind because they are two different things, but they work in tandem, much like the brain itself and our bodies. And while being the most complex thing in the universe that we know of is the human brain, nothing even comes close. Nothing comes close to it. And ever since people have had the realization of where thoughts reside, people have tried to gain control and manipulate it, whether it's in somebody else or themselves. And this goes with the modern world that we live in. People like to deny that anyone else can have control over their bodies, over their minds, but we live in a world now where we've already given so much control away, and we've already been given the rights to manipulate us to the hands of other people. And I think it's a really important topic because it shows the layers and complexities that we live with in this modern world. We have electronic devices of all sorts, and the more our world gets built up around us, the less control we seem to be having with our thoughts, especially since the year 2000. There was a really big change. The 1990s, to a lot of scientists, are considered, the year of the decade of the brain, research. We have uncovered more since then that it should be alarming, but it's important because I state this in previous episodes. Excuse me, I state this in previous episodes, and this is something I like to stress, is the fact that everything we create and every product and byproduct of humanity is a tool, and there's a proper and improper way to use it. That's something that a friend of mine actually brought up to me many years ago, and that just kind of stuck and makes so much sense. Because humans also like to do things under the guise of something else. And a lot of research that happens today, you see this really a lot with China and with even the US government. Plans and initiatives are fought for what seems like ulterior motives, reverse psychology of sorts. And outright, a lot of organizations say they do some things for good because of what we can achieve. However, there's the other side to that, which is the power they can gain from that, because all people really want power. You know, you want control over yourself. You want control over the things around you in your home, your family, the food you eat. Everything is about control. If you have no control, then what's really the point of anything? What's the point of you living? The only thing you'd really gain to live for at that point is pleasure. And pleasure can be artificially induced as well. And I think that sometimes is the goal of big entities, is to make you feel that you are pleased and happy with other people taking control over you and making decisions for you. It's very similar to being a baby or being an extremely old person where you don't even have control over yourself. Other people are doing it for you, for, you know, just to maintain your life, pretty much. And a lot of the companies take that initiative too because they gain from that as well. Money from insurance or whatever it is. And so you do have to wonder about the motives behind a lot of these procedures or the research that's going on in a lot of these institutions. And you could say, you know, a lot of the research that's done to diagnose diseases and treat diseases could, at the very same token, be used to control. The more people figure out how the brain works and psychology works, the more they can use it and then kind of lull you into some sort of state to give away more power to them to control you. So one aspect to having control over your mind is understanding the ability others may have in order to gain some sort of advantage over you. You know, like VR, virtual reality, is something that is so exciting and so enticing and so amazing. At the same time, it's going further and further to figure out how the brain works, the mind works with visuals and feelings and emotion, to the point where you can start making an amazing product that does everything that you want to and entices you into having it. But then all that information that's figured out and written down and documented can also be sold to governments or corporations or other entities that have ulterior motives. I mean, what do people that create a lot of games want to do anyway? They were trying to find ways to keep you enticed and to keep your attention focused on that. Especially a lot of free games. You know, you should always be hesitant when something is free. I don't play free games. And I look into the games that I do get when I play them, because I think playing video games and engaging your mind and brain into something can be very healthy and keep it moving and keep it young and sharp. And activities that help build your imagination can also be extremely healthy and even rewarding. One thing that I have stated before too is that's one of the reasons I don't watch TV or, you know, most movies or media. And for one is it's hard to find time for it. And another thing is I understand a lot of the psychology behind it. It's like, why do you even need to get yourself involved with some of these things? And I know some people might not like to hear this, but once something becomes a tool for conglomerates and pop culture organizations and stuff like Marvel and the comic book movies and superheroes and stuff like that, the only thing they are focused on is raking in the money and trying to find ways to convince you want to watch that and you want to take a part in that. But what do you really get from spending hours and hours and hours and hours of your life just focused on something that they're handing you visually? Like I said before, there's, certain parts of the brain that are designed for pleasure, and to understand how that works, people can take advantage of that and make you think you want something. It's the same how people can be really good salesmen or salespeople, and you have to take that into consideration, because what are you really getting out of it? People are really good at selling you things if they have, control over their mind and all the aspects that are involved with, convincing somebody that they want something. I like to create things, but I'm very selective in the things that I partake in that other people create. Especially the more it seems in line with a company or some sort of conglomerate to some degree. Like Hollywood. I don't watch Hollywood movies. I refuse to watch Hollywood movies because they spend so much time and money hiring psychologists and psychiatrists and the people that know the inner workings of the mind. And they incorporate those in subliminal messages with animations they have and special effects. And they spend a great deal of time asking people questions on what they like. And just from that alone, you can tell that they're not really interested in what you want per se. They're interested in what's going to keep your attention focused to them. And that is a very selfish thing, and that has very obvious ulterior motives in my point of view. And the same thing is true with, television. And what are some of the things that television shows and movies and even video games and all sorts of media and music focus on now more than they have in the past? And I think a lot of that has to do with the instinctual drives that guide the brain and the mind in daily life. What are some of the things that the human body yearns for the most? It's those basic drives that keep you alive and are survival traits. And that has to do with food, with violence, with sex, with drugs, because drugs is something highly emotional. It's something that can literally control your brain and control your mind in so many different ways. And any type of pleasure zone in your brain is something that people want to be able to induce and control. And it is everywhere, from Coca-Cola ads to Disney shows and movies. Pretty much anything you can think of that has been marketed, especially in the mainstream and mostly in the mainstream. Because the whole goal is to try to raise as much money as possible by getting as many people involved in your product as possible. They don't really care about you. They care about manipulating you. And the same thing is true today. I mean, you're seeing that everywhere. You're seeing how much control and power these corporations have over people, especially the young people, and especially with whoever they want to target, with whatever affiliations people have. They want to be able to control and have some sort of oligarchy, monarchy, uh, all different types of archies. And I think it's really important to be able to separate yourself from other people's goals and initiatives and wonder and decide, is that right for you? Is that something that you want to partake? Because what will happen if you do partake? What will happen if you do get involved and if you bring your family to get involved? And they take advantage of all the things that the human mind wants to do and the social patterns that people want to be involved with, because anything and everything that people have on their mind and people do will be exploited by somebody else who is trying to find out how they can exploit that. And it doesn't matter what kind of system that you're in. Some people will want to blame capitalism because it's all about money. But capitalism is not about money. It's about being a private entity and having your own drive and creating success out of your own personal needs. It has, think about where mind control really started in socialist countries and communist countries like MK Ultra and stuff like that, because they want the whole population and all the masses to follow to everything they say. And they will twist words around and they will use any means necessary and exploit every single thing that people do. You see organizations do this all the time. You see reverse psychology being used all the time. And you have to wonder who is really in control over the minds of the masses. Obviously, they're going to target you. Obviously, they're going to target everyone you know and everybody you have met. Psychological warfare has been around since humanity, since people could think, since the first human-like creature tried to take advantage of another creature. That in itself is another human drive and emotion, and it is a selfish one. And humans are not only social, but they're also very selfish because it's about survival, and you have to survive. And the only person you can rely on to survive ultimately in the end is yourself. So you need to have control over yourself and master yourself first and foremost. And then over that and past that, you can start, trying to incorporate equality to some extent within your family and your friends, and try to work as a team to achieve things. And every step people take can also be used against them too, because what do these corporations do? They're working in tandem as well. Every single thing that people do has many different sides to it and can be used in many different ways. And this is the complexity that is the mind and is life. And we have to find ways to mediate everything and find ways to balance everything and understand other people as well as ourselves, because people can gain control and use propaganda and use any means necessary to control the brain and control the mind. I mean, you're seeing this even with VR, like I mentioned earlier. But what are they doing? They're coming up with headsets that read certain patterns in your brain and in your mind. And if these companies can do it, then other companies have tried this before. You can penetrate the mind and the brain with, invisible waves of different types. If a cell phone can send signals invisibly from one place to another in electronic devices, then why can't biological things? It's experiments have been done in the past where they've measured the brain waves of animals and what happened when their offspring, they purposely did something to their offspring without the rabbits in particular for one experiment. This was an experiment that happened in the Soviet Union and Czechoslovakia. And what they did was they took rabbits and they took the offspring from the rabbit and they separated them. And they wanted to see if there was any connection between the parents and the offspring. And what they would do is they would do experiments, whether they were torturing or killing or whatever to the offspring. And they noticed that during a lot of these experiments, when they were doing that, certain areas in the parent's brain would fire and misfire, specifically under those circumstances. So I have no doubt in my mind that people and things and living organisms are a lot more connected than just what we see physically. You know, going deeper into that is can be saved for a whole bunch of other videos, because there's so much to do with biological creatures and how they're interconnected, just like non-physical things and electricity and, you know, Bluetooth and wireless and all those things. We know that the human brain gives off brainwaves. We know that they receive brainwaves. To what extent, we don't know. But if you can control an object by using your mind, by putting on some sort of helmet or some sort of sensors not even connected to the brain, that shows you that there are brainwaves being produced and given off by the brain. And the more science goes along and figures this out, the more it can be manipulated. You know, look up VR systems that are controlled by the mind. Look up video games and anything else that's controlled by the mind. You're going to find it, and you're going to find really interesting information. And this information is and will always be used by people that have more influence and say and money and control and power than we as the regular citizen does. So it's really important to try to understand yourself and understand your mind as much as possible, because since this is the most complex thing that we know of, it's also important to state how it doesn't come with a manual. And us being born as humans are never told and are never given something or pamphlets that tell us how to use the brain and how to use our own internal parts. It's something that you have to figure out as you go in this world. And most people, I think, don't even think twice about it, really. They're just going on about in their daily lives. And even if you bring stuff like this up, a lot of people will deny it. But I'm telling you right now, look up what I'm saying. Look up the brain waves given off by people. There's alpha, gamma, and beta, and delta waves that are given off. And people give off different waves in different states, depending on what kind of state or mood they are in, or what they're induced under. People that are sleeping give off, you know, delta waves. And it's so complex to the point where this new technology is allowing us to discover these new things. And you better believe that other people are going to take advantage of this. And the more that we start figuring out and advancing technologies, like whether it's 5G or 6G or 7G or the new, you know, sidewalk meshes and Bluetooth meshes and Wi-Fi meshes that are being created right now that are soon to be released, will use all these waves to their advantage. You can turn Wi-Fi devices into radar systems, essentially. You can turn the things we use and electronics that we use against us. And the more that people are going to get involved with these things, the more hackable and exploitative they'll be. When all these technologies come out, like the new next wave of Bluetooth and everything I just mentioned, there are going to be so many exploits. And then when people try to get, you know, cybernetic implants, and wireless connections in their head to their devices and to whatever else in the world, there are going to be people that will exploit that, and they will hack into your brain, and they will make you think certain things, and they will control you. It's not even a question of if, it's when will they do it. These are just the realities of the times we're stepping into. And these are realities. It's really important to understand. People can be controlled by chemicals as well. You know, nothing that I'm saying should really be surprising at all. This is the most complex thing, and these are the dangers of and advantages of understanding the brain. The mere fact that we have scientists and governments and other people spending their entire lives dedicated to figuring out more about the brain and how to control the brain, and a lot of these experiments are under the guise of helping people and eliminating things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and whatever other disorders there are. 1/3 of Americans suffer some form of mental health problem, and that goes under psychological problems, physical problems, dementias, all sorts of states of mental health. That encompasses anything to do with the mentality that you can think of, the human mentality, the mind, the brain, how it functions. 1/3, over 100 million people in just the United States fall under that category. And the interesting thing is, why does that many people, or do that many people fall under that category? What is going on in our environment? Was it always like that? Probably not. Probably the further back you go in time, there are probably less and less mental complications there were. But the more we're exposed to things in our environment, whether it's lead or mercury or brand new materials that people are coming up with, dust in the air, certain types of dust that never existed before because of the machining of things, heavy metals, the chemicals that are released into the water, into food, the lack of minerals and vitamins and things that are found in our food, because a lot of these things are also being harvested specifically for other reasons. Like zinc, for instance, is something that's becoming harder and harder for the humans, for human consumption. It's being pulled out of our soil. It's being pulled out of the ground and used for other purposes other than where it was placed. The fact that of certain minerals like that, magnesium and things like that, or manganese to be more precise, is being pulled out and used for production and other things, to where now it's not even found in our soil, which it's not being found in our fruits and vegetables, and it's not being found in the animals we eat because they eat the fruits and vegetables and the grains. And all that zinc and selenium and all the minerals and metals and things that we need in our body is being depleted and being pulled out from our diet, which should be extremely alarming. And that's why you're seeing a lot more deficiencies in people as well. And that's one of the reasons also why you see a lot of food enriched with a lot of these minerals. They're either overprocessed or they're made and farmed in places that lack these minerals and materials. And there's only a certain amount. And if we're taking all these materials and minerals and stuff from out of the food production and out of the soil and out of the ground and used for other purposes and misplaced, how are we going to get it? It should be quite alarming. And we're seeing an unbalance in all sorts of things, even in oceanic life, which is vital. The lack of thiamine and other vitamins and minerals found in the ocean, and the surplus of toxic ones should be alarming too. For all we know, it could be produced from the coral that is now dying and the planktons and all these other things in our environment that's becoming unbalanced. It should really be alarming as to why we're seeing so many more people under some sort of mental health crisis, even if they're unaware of it. Why are people becoming obsessed with certain things to the extreme? um, why is why is people's biology changing, and why are we seeing imbalance of hormones more than ever now, and people being confused about their sexuality because of their mental state and physical state and chemical imbalance? Why is there so many chemical imbalances? And even people that are, mixed gender or whatever you want to say, will admit that they have hormone imbalances. And why? Where is this coming from? Humanity has drastically changed in not only the last 100 years, but the last 50 years. We're seeing more and more deformities happen. We're seeing a lot more damaged DNA. We're seeing a lot more malnutrition. Even with people that overeat, there's malnutrition, people not getting the right amount of properties that you need inside your body. And so everything that people are doing biologically should be under some sort of scrutiny and should try to be understood. But at the same time it's trying to be understood, it's also exploited. These are the dualities that we come across with everyday life, with trying to understand biology and health and survival. There's always more than one side, and more than one side to a coin even. Sometimes there's even more than two sides. And I think it's really important to take that into consideration. Make sure you have control over your mind. Make sure you're always constantly trying to learn and understand yourself and the outside world. It's really important, because if you don't, someone's going to take advantage of that over you, and they're going to try to control your mind, and they're going to try to infiltrate your mind and even control you from the inside. And I think that should be alarming, because as time goes on, certain people are becoming better and better at that. And I don't think you ever want to be someone that's going to be controlled from the inside. And I don't think you want to think about your future generations and your children and grandchildren being controlled completely by somebody else. And who knows, even turning against you. And then all of a sudden, you are the enemy because you're not thinking like them. And other people have control. So those are some of the dangers of trying to understand the mind and the brain and biology and biochemistry, and make sure that someone won't get this control over you, and make sure you're trying to figure out what they are trying to learn and what they are trying to do, and stay away from anything that involves control over you, unless it's yourself. And I think it's extremely important. Something that I definitely wanted to get out and to talk about and explain. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this channel talking about things that I think is important. I'd really love to hear what you guys have to say. Let me know, because I want to hear from you people too. I really do. I don't want this to just be a one-way conversation. Although I will continue to talk and speak my mind, because I think that's important. Hopefully in some way I'm able to maybe even get you guys to think about some things that you haven't, and it would be great if you guys can get me to think about stuff that I haven't before, because it's really important to take as many things as possible into consideration. So with that, I love you. Be well, be healthy, stay aware, and do the best that you can in life. That's what's really important. Do the best that you can in life, the best that you can for the people that you love, and just be aware as much as possible. And if you ever have free time, do research into any topic you find interesting. Anything you want to learn about, try to learn about it. Try to understand, because the more you're aware about something, then the less someone is going to be able to take advantage of you. The same thing with like subliminal messages and brainwashing. If you're aware of it, it's not going to be able to affect you, or at least in the same way at all. It's not going to have the same effect. And that's what's important. Having control over your mind and matter that makes you up. So take care. I love you. And until next time, let's have another awesome conversation. See you around.